Introductions. First of all, welcome everyone. My name is Marguerite Herman. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Cheyenne, and this forum is being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Wyoming. We have leagues in Gillette, Casper, Cheyenne, and Laramie. Welcome everyone in the audience. Welcome everyone who's listening online and listening live on KGAB Radio. And welcome everyone who's going to access the video on YouTube and the League of Women Voters website, which you can see is www.wyominglwv.org. We'll try to get it up as soon as possible. I expect to have it up on YouTube by tomorrow, if all things work. It's kind of arduous, but we'll do our best. Okay, a little housekeeping, if I can find my notes here. Sorry. Okay, this is the Laramie County Commission hearing room. So we want to thank the county for making this room available free, and their recording facilities there in the back. I want to let you also know that Charter, for those of you in Cheyenne who get Charter cable TV, they are going to rebroadcast the forums. Last night we had Secretary of State, Superintendent of Public Instruction. So in addition to all the other venues you have of watching this and hearing it tonight and in the future, Charter is going to put it on their Channel 19. The forums from last night, Secretary of State, Superintendent, are going to be broadcast next Wednesday, that is August 6th at 6 p.m. And the forum for tonight for the gubernatorial candidates will be broadcast Saturday, August 9th at 11 a.m. So people who want to view it on TV and maybe even record it, TiVo it, that's another possibility. Just a reminder to everyone, the primaries are August 19th. Early voting has started. And you know that you will be selecting candidates to advance to the general election, and that is on November 4th. And there again will be early voting on that as well. This is a very important election. U.S. Senator, Congressman, and the top 5 elected officials that are named in our state constitution all will be selected. You will also be voting for 60 members of the State House and 15 of the State Senate, that's half of them. In addition to your local officials, they will run your government for the next 2 to 4 years. So this is very important. And also there's a constitutional amendment that's going to be on your general election ballot, and this will allow non-state residents to serve on the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees. So you might want to think about that, study about it, and the league probably will do a pro-con flyer on that as the time approaches. But just be aware that that will be on your ballot as well. Just a word about the League of Women Voters. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization open to anyone old enough to vote. We do not support one candidate over another, but we do advocate for issues. We advocate for open, accountable government. Plus, our voter service activities support our statement, be informed and vote. And that's what the purpose of the forums, both when we did county offices yesterday and then tonight on the state offices, that's what it's all about. To let the candidates tell you what their issues are, their stands, so you can make an informed decision at the polls. Also, we hope that you will check out their websites for the candidates, check out their campaign literature. They almost all have websites, I think, and if you have a question, call them up. So, you know, they're there, they want to reach you, so please, we encourage you to use that venue as well. Now, the League of Women Voters has prepared several questions for the candidates, and they've had these questions for a week. And what we will do tonight is we'll run through these questions, and then we will use questions from the audience, and you guys have already been writing questions, which is good. Please write questions that we can ask all the candidates. If you write a question that's designed for just one particular candidate, we will try to reword it so that everybody can answer it. We'll do our best. If we can't use it. So please make an effort in that direction. And we will be going through the questions. Maybe we'll try to consolidate questions because we have a stack this thick, so we can't get to them all tonight. We'll get to as many as we can. Be aware that if we can't get to your question because of time, what we'll try to do is access them for an online voter's guide. So if you write a good question and we don't get to it tonight, we'll try to get to it in another way. So don't be discouraged about that. Just a word about decorum. We have a lot of, I think, passionate supporters here for various candidates. We're trying to preserve an air that where every candidate gets a chance to speak his or her piece. So please, no outbursts. At the end, you can save all your pent-up approval or disapproval for the very end. We're trying to maintain really a calm, especially for those people who are listening online and over the radio. So let's make this as productive for all the people as possible. And if you have signs and materials, we have a place out. We have tables out in the hallway where you can put that. And again, I encourage people to access campaign literature there too. So, a word about the format. Usually I do this when the candidate's in the room, but apparently they're waiting to the last minute. But they understand this all. So here's how it's going to work. Everybody's going to have 2 minutes to open. Everyone gets a 2 minute, which they can use any way they want. They can introduce themselves. They can talk about an issue, whatever. Then the questions will be 1.5 minutes to respond. Everyone will get a response time, and then we will open up the floor to, if any of the candidates want to add a comment, add what they've said, respond to another candidate. They can have about a 30-second follow-up if they want. That'll be an optional thing. And then there will be 2 minutes to close. And what we'll do after we run through the lead questions, we'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. We have a timer. Pat over there, she will hold up, and so everyone can see. But for the 1.5 minutes and the 30 seconds, she'll say, 30 seconds left, 15 seconds left, and then the shocking pink says stop. So we're hoping that the candidates will use that to kind of pace themselves and not run over, because it will shorten the amount of questions we can get to. So we're try to use some discipline in that regard. Every candidate will be treated exactly the same. There's, as I said, no favoritism here. So, in service of that, we should get started here. I want to introduce our moderator for tonight, Kathy Carpin. She a proud native of Rock Springs. She was elected to 2 terms as Secretary of State in 1986 and 1990. She was appointed by President Clinton as Director of the Federal Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement in the Department of the Interior from 1997 through 2000. Currently, she practices law in Cheyenne, and she's going to have some leeway to ask follow-up questions if she thinks an issue really needs a little bit more expansion, but she's going to run the show, and her capable hands, being an attorney, I think she's used to practicing in front of a judge. She'll do a fine job tonight. So I will just turn it over to you. And
maybe you can rewrite that question.
Okay.
And of the questions we have, 4 of the 6 are directed to a candidate. And as Marguerite said, to be fair, you should ask a question that all candidates could answer. But having said that, welcome to our candidates. I'd like to introduce them. Mr. Pete Gosar, Governor Matt Mead, Dr. Taylor Haynes, and Superintendent of Public Instruction Cindy Hill. Let's welcome them. Thank you. And you can be seated.
Thank you.
They're really taking my role seriously. My gosh. All right. Well, you now have, as you know from the rules that the league gave you, 2 minutes for opening, and for convenience, I'll start with Mr. Gosar and go to the right. So you have 2 minutes, Mr. Gosar.
Well, thank you. And so as I sit here on an event like today, I can't help but the thoughts of a young Basque lady who tells me in Pinedale every day, make sure you say thank you. They'll invite you back. So I'm going to start with that. And I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters. I'd like to thank Ms. Carpin, our moderator, everybody who put this great event together. Superintendent Hill, Dr. Haynes, Governor Meade, for being here. I know what the schedule looks like, and I know how cramped it can be. But most of all, I'd like to thank you. It's important. This government that we put together is based on people, and I think we should not lose sight of that. And as I travel around the state, it's the people that I focus upon. As a working class guy, you're sometimes not given the opportunity to not come away with solutions. And so I focus on solutions. And I think that there's a real possibility for solution, but it takes an honest and open conversation. And you have to be willing to take those positions that maybe sometimes aren't poll tested, maybe sometimes might just have you in opposition to people in the crowd. But you look people in the eye because this is still a handshake state. And this is still where we talk to people that we might disagree with, and then we go have dinner. Because solutions for me is the ultimate goal of government. And if I'm fortunate enough to be elected governor, you can count on solutions. You can count on honest and open conversations. I think I learned on the field at War Memorial a long time ago, if you walk it, you talk it. And so we talk it, and we say, you know what, if there's a conversation needs to be had, come talk to us. We'll open it up. Facebook every Wednesday night, 7 to 9, we take every question you'll give us. And as much as we can handle, thank you very much.
Governor Meade.
Well, let me join in thanking all of you for being here and the League of Women Voters for putting this on, the other candidates. It's nice to be here. And Taylor, round number 2 for you and I. Good to see you.
Here we go.
Here we go. And Pete, I was just wondering where the light was, so thank you. I miss that sometimes. I want to tell you a little bit about Wyoming. You know, when I took over office, we've had a history of strong legislators, strong governors in the state. And I knew there was an obligation to continue that on. And so when I took over, unemployment was about 6.7%. Now it's about 4%. We have the 6th lowest unemployment in the country. We are the lowest tax state. We're just recently ranked as the 2nd best state in terms of being business friendly. We have the lowest foreclosure rate. And all that adds up to strength. Strength for our state and strength for individual citizens. And that's why we have the lowest poverty rate in the nation when it comes to kids. Because nothing's more valuable than our kids. And so I'm proud of that record. And it doesn't come easy. You have to fight the fight, and we have fought the fight. We are involved in 27 lawsuits with the federal government, 13 of which involve the EPA. That's the fight we have taken on, and have gladly done it. We win some of those, but we also recognize there's opportunities, and we've had opportunities to find solutions, whether it's getting wolves delisted and having the first wolf hunt in a long period of time, whether it's opening up Yellowstone to non-commercial snow machines. These are the things that we've accomplished. I'm running on my record, and I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of our state, and I'm proud of the citizens of our state. So I look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. And I also like to thank the League of Women Voters. This is a tradition, and they always put these on, and I'm always very grateful. And I thank the other candidates for being here. As I've traveled the state, my strength is the people. My strength is talking to as many people as possible. But I actually let them talk to me. I've learned a great deal about our state. I've felt a little pain with the empty storefronts, the loss of jobs in the coal mining industry. And I've seen some fear about what is going to happen with coal. I've been blessed with background, not only formal education, but the business experience, to see what's happening to coal as an opportunity, to see what's happening to our natural resource base as an opportunity. For me as governor to unleash this tremendous economic power, for me to allow us to go to where the Lord intended us to go when he put all that mineral wealth in the ground. I have not only the educational background, but the business experience to lead this state to peace, prosperity, and liberty. Thank you.
Superintendent Hill.
And I'd just like to say, oops, there's my mic. I'd like to also say thank you to everyone who's in the room, and then to all of those who are listening. I know KGAB is streaming today, and for those who are listening, the room is full. It's standing room only. And I'm anxious to start our debate, because as you know, especially the listeners, government is upside down. The government should always be serving the people. And SF 104 was a perfect example of the government taking your rights. In this case, the governor taking your right to vote. He's proven that he's not trustworthy in protecting your rights. Your rights are being taken on a daily basis behind closed doors and in ways that most people will never see. You must have a governor who has at her very core the protection of the people's rights. It's not my purpose tonight to forensically lay open the person or persons whose actions have actually taken your rights. My purpose is to work with the people and those who are listening to set a course of correction, guided by the first 7 words of our Wyoming State Constitution. All power is inherent in the people. In the people. Tonight, we'll be reviewing some documents, and it'll be in the best interest for those who are listening. If you would, go to my website. I invite the listeners to go there, cindyhillforgovernor.com, to follow along. If you'll click on the debate tab, there we can have, to the greatest possible ability, the interactive conversation that I look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you in the back here? Very good. I would remind the candidates to speak into the microphone. It appears you are doing so. We'll go to the first question. I'll start with you, Mr. Gosar. And if any of you want me to repeat the question, even though you got it in advance, I'll be glad to. Just let me know. Question 1. The governor sits on the State Loan and Investment Board and the Board of Land Commissioners, and in fact is chairman of those 2 bodies. How would you weigh requests for loans and grants from local governments when there isn't enough money to approve all of them? What positions do you bring to decisions on school trust lands?
Well, thank you, and I'll take the State Land and Investment Board first. I think public infrastructure is critical, and it sets the foundation for not only our economy, but our education, our healthy environments. And so I'm a big supporter of the grant program, but especially I'm a supporter of the loan program. Because as a son of Pinedale, sometimes development gets out in front, and you need the infrastructure to be built to be able to handle that. But you can't supply the needs for every wish list in every county and city. And so you have to prioritize. And so I often hear, as I travel around the state and as a small business owner, run the state like a business. Well, I think that that's true in some regard. If the business that you're running is in the business of people and the communities that they live in. And so how do you do that? You take those businesses and communities and you infrastructure based on general good and the general well-being, and then you prioritize those down with less impact on those in the communities. With the State Board of Commissioners, you move your way as a multi-purpose use. I believe that you need to balance mineral extraction and agriculture and public use. I think as a multi-use that it's best for the State Board and Commissioners.
Thank you. Governor Meade?
Well, the question is, what do you do when there's not enough money? First of all, we certainly try to make sure that happens less often than not. And I have done that. In terms of local government in 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014, I've continued to ask for more money for local funding. And it's because of my fundamental belief that jobs are created at the local level. It's where people live. And we've had good luck working with the county commissioners, with city council, with mayors. And in doing that, we see the results. Last session, we were able to ask for and get $175 million for local government. I'm proud of that because that is where the jobs come from. On top of that, in weighing those decisions, because there'll never be enough money for every project, you have to look at the return on the investment, you have to look at the need, you have to look at whether or not the community itself is supportive of the project. You have to look at whether it's going to help diversify our economy, whether it'll help sustain our 3 big industries, minerals, ag, and tourism, whether it's part and parcel of what our vision is for Wyoming in terms of our quality of life, the needs of our citizens, and moving the state forward.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. The question clearly is, what do you do when there's not enough money? Well, first of all, you make sure there is enough money by taking over the rest of our property and collecting that additional 51% of our mineral wealth. You remove the EPA from Wyoming and you allow our natural resource base to flourish. You allow our DEQ to protect our environment. You allow Wyoming people to run Wyoming. That's the first step. And even if that comes to a situation where there's not enough money, you must weigh the decision based on the highest need, public health and safety. All infrastructure projects being equal at that point, you got to look at public health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Hill.
We have a $9 billion budget. We need stable funding for our communities. When you have, as we do, communities coming hat in hand, this is how you make decisions on this LIB board, or how I do. First, safety issues come first, and that would be fire trucks or facilities, and then you have their infrastructure, and that might be sewer and water, and then, of course, you have those needed improvements, anything that the community might need in order to solve their problems. That might even be a landfill. And their second question might be, or I understand, is about school land trust lands. And I had a display, a 3-foot by 4-foot display that I wanted to show you tonight. Because right now, our lands belong, of course, to the people. You would think so. You would think they belong to the people, and I've always taken that very seriously. But the current governor is entertaining a proposal for a swap of a parcel that I wanted to show you tonight. And for those who are listening, if you'll go to the debate tab, tap on button titled Land, and you will see that this parcel, this state land at the base of Devil's Tower, priceless land, is being considered for being given away to whom? A state senator. And I say to you, for right now, I blocked it. And as your governor, I would not entertain political transactions on state lands.
Thank you very much. Now, as we stated in the rules, if any of you would like to comment on another person's answer, please just raise your hand and I will give you that opportunity. Anyone wish to comment? If not, we'll move to our second question from the League. And Governor, I'll start with you. A new analysis of our state institutions shows that many need to be updated, redesigned, made more efficient, maybe downsized. What is your vision for these institutions? Can you help give some direction to the legislature? And for the audience, our state institutions, this is not an exclusive list, but for example, the state hospital in Evanston, the Pioneer Home in Thermopolis, the Veterans Home in Buffalo, the retirement home in Basin, the training school, I think it's got a new name, that's kind of a dated reference, in Lander. So Governor, we'll begin with you, as I said.
Well, thank you. It's a great question. And the analysis that you're talking about last session, I got the ball rolling last session when I asked the legislature we want to do a good job. We've got the facilities and we want to make sure that they're strong and that they're taking on and doing the job required to do. And so last session I asked for $60 million. And as a result of the legislative session, a task force was put together that traveled to and looked at each one of these where the facilities could be improved. And in doing that, before we start building and making changes, this task force wanted to see just at the systems itself. But one of the things in doing that, some people, whether it's the Life Resource Center or one of the other facilities, they have concerns that we may be shutting these down. On the contrary, my view is, how do we make them stronger? How do we make them better? For example, in Evanston, we have some terribly old buildings that need to be shut down, but new ones may need to be put up. So this task force that's put together, they're looking at it. I'm eager to see their entire recommendations. These facilities are important to Wyoming. They're important to the people who use them, so we're going to make them stronger.
Thank you, Governor. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. A task force is kind of another way of having a committee that doesn't do much. Each facility should also already have an O&M, planned maintenance, deferred maintenance, and that should come to the central body. If that hasn't happened, then somebody needs to be taken into account. So some of the facilities are very old and historic, like the Wyoming State Hospital, like the Life Resource Center, etc. These facilities were built and staffed at a time when Wyoming had a very small population and even a smaller number of practitioners. And now their function has needed to be spread statewide. Some of these are flagship, and they do train people, treat people statewide. I think what we need to look at is spreading as many of these services as possible around the state. And then we use these flagship facilities for the most difficult problems, like the state hospital can be used for those folks who are severely mentally handicapped and need to be supervised. The rest of the facilities can be used as leadership in the state for those services to be provided statewide.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Superintendent Hill.
Thank you, Kathy. There is a task force currently looking at these things. I believe they met in June and July. Each of the facilities has a different solution, and I'd like to go ahead, since I only have 2 minutes, to talk about one facility. Let's talk about Lander. This here would be good if I'm your governor on the people served versus the building. You have some profoundly disabled people who are residing in this facility, and it's at approximate cost of $400,000 per year. While some families are able to successfully care for their loved ones at home at about approximate cost of $120,000, the current governor is cutting services to these folks. Some of these families are receiving cuts that just don't make sense. If you go to YPEP, that's YWEPP, and at their website you can learn more. I encourage you to see the film that's about the forgotten people of Wyoming. You might ask, why are we continually focusing on buildings when we need to focus on the people of Wyoming? That's what a government does, is providing services, especially to its most profoundly disabled. And it only does that always first, never at the cost of a building.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Gosar.
Excuse me. Well, thank you, and I think this is an issue that bears a solution and calls for one. Certainly we need to balance state institution with community-based programs, and you know, the research is pretty clear that if you can deliver service closest to the family and to the person, that's the best service. But there's a reality that many small communities won't have those services available, and so we have to find a way, and we're going to have to innovate. And I sat and talked with an executive at a hospice who said, you know, we have the ability to offer respite care. And not a week later, I talked to some families who said, you know, that's the one thing we could use, respite care. And so we're going to have to find a way to innovate. And the state was standing in the way of that solution. And so we need to find a way. And then we need to find a long-term solution. Surely something along the lines of a trust fund where the corpus generates revenues, and those revenues are used to these special people and their populations and their families. We're a great state. We're used to be #1 in this category. We've slipped to 41. That's not the direction we need to go. And we can handle this. We can do this right. And we're better than this.
Thank you, Mr. Gosar. Would anyone wish to comment on someone else's response?
I would.
Superintendent Hill.
And thank you, Mr. Gosar, for mentioning that we're 41. We were #1 years ago when we focused on truly the services instead of building edifices. We were truly focusing on our people, and we were #1. And it's high time that we get back to actually serving the people of Wyoming, especially our most vulnerable.
Anyone else, Governor?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, of course, I'm sure everyone knows last session I had asked for some additional money for our DD population and ABI population, which we got, a total of about $20 million. The session before I had asked for some additional money, not all of which we got. So this is an issue that we certainly have been working on. But
may I respond to his comment?
All right, but not too much back and forth.
Okay, here we go.
We're going to have to keep this in
$10.1 million was actually appropriated in the legislative session last session. It was actually matched by another 10.1, so $20.2 million, and we still have cut. And it's unreasonable. Why are we cutting families and services who are taking care of most in their homes for fewer dollars than it costs to be institutionalized? We want to know where that money's going, Governor.
Thank you. Now, question 3, and Dr. Haynes will begin with you. The governor, well, I don't know if I agree with this. The governor has quite a lot of influence, but this is the question. The governor has quite a lot of influence over the state budget being the starting point of the biennial budget process as it enters the legislature. What are your budgetary priorities for saving versus spending, including the legislature's rainy day fund? How about support for local government?
Thank you. There's 3 questions. First of all, the governor's influence over the budget depends on how well the governor works with the legislature. The legislature controls the budget. That's a key point. So the governor works with all the state agencies as they develop their budgets, and then once that negotiation is complete and the governor signs off on the budget, he takes that to the legislature. So my job would be that the state agencies, first of all, have bought into the vision that the people of Wyoming elected me for. And then they've shaped their agencies to accomplish that vision. And then we develop a budget to start on that vision. That's the first part of that. The second part about the rainy day fund, I really like the idea of the rainy day fund. And for you folks who don't know, the rainy day fund is designed to have a biennium in savings so we have the earnings in case the state goes down. However, I think you have to have a balance between this idea of saving and also meeting community needs. I would really like to see a formula that goes back to the communities based on the infrastructure, which we have a 60-40 split, but I would like to see a guaranteed amount of money going back every year so that they don't have to come with hat in hand. I'd like to see that coming out of the additional mineral money that we'll get when I'm governor. Thank you.
That signals in. Superintendent Hill. Thank you, Dr. Haynes.
Thanks, Kathy. A governor needs to be immersed in the detail. I reviewed every budget line by line, series by series, and that's the only way that you can actually manage a budget. I don't believe it should be managed on the backs of the people. I don't believe in taxing people, and that's what we've been doing. We have a gas tax, and I'll work to repeal it if I'm governor. I cut contracts that didn't make sense. I actually managed expenditures. That's what you do. For those who are listening on KGAB, if you look at money and press the money button, you can see those documents. I'm not against government savings. I think it's a good idea, but not on the backs of the people. We don't need to bolster our savings while the people are working so hard to actually do the lifting and the sweating in this state. We need to rein in government spending.
Thank you. Mr. Gosar.
Well, thank you. For over 50 years, we've been stashing away money in places throughout the government that, if you look at the chart and graph, it's amazing to try to comprehend. And so my first priority would be to have a fair and impartial accounting of what those coffee cans, as they're referred to, what they are what their priorities are, and if they even make sense anymore. And then you need to set about your vision and a strategic plan. You need to plan for those days when it is raining, and maybe it's not raining right now, but in some communities I would argue it is. And you need to have a way to prepare for those rainy days. And like the farmer who puts away part of his crop so that he can buy seeds in the springtime, that's how we have to do the budget. And I think we have to make sure that it's a transparent process where people understand. This is the part that I think is maybe the most important. People need to know where their money's going and what it's there for. And I think that that's not often known. And I think that if you spend that money the closest to the places where infrastructure is delivered, where it's critical, I think that's a good use of those funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Governor Mead.
Well, thank you for the question. You know, the part of it is local funding, and I've talked about local funding and how important it is and how I've gotten a lot of local funding back to the locals. But the idea of the rainy day fund, we need a rainy day fund because we recognize that things can change, and we don't want to be like the federal government and go broke and then keep spending. The question is, you know, what is the right balance? And for local government, I can tell you that in some communities, they definitely think that it is in fact raining. And so what I have proposed is 2 different alternatives. One is taking 1/2 of the 1% that goes in the permanent fund and using that to help fund local government. I've also proposed alternatively to get that rainy day fund up to $3 billion, where we're basing our budget based on what the money is that we actually have versus what we're projecting through the Craig report. Either of those alternatives I think are worth looking at when it comes to rainy day, because I know since I've become governor, rainy day fund has grown from $800 million to about 1.7 or a little over 1.7 billion. It is nice to have those savings, but we have to recognize if Wyoming's a stock, you want to invest in Wyoming, in our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure, and that's what I've been trying to do with my support of local government.
Thank you, Governor. Now, I'm going to say I'm making an administrative decision here. One comment per question.
Thank you, Kathy.
Superintendent Hill, your comment.
At the end of May of 2014, the Wyoming State portfolio had $18.7 billion in market value, $18.7 billion. It's enough to operate the general fund at the current spending levels for over a decade. Are we waiting for a rainy day or a biblical flood here?
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? If not, we'll turn to question number 4, and Superintendent Hill, we will ask you this one first. It seems everyone agrees that Wyoming needs to diversify its economy, to rely less on the fossil fuels industry, or to diversify the mineral industry itself. Do you agree? And what is the state's role in achieving it? What do you think about providing incentives for business development, grants, loans, tax breaks?
I wrote, it's called People and Principles, a declaration, and I devoted Chapter 6 to just this, economic development. Of course, we need to diversify. Of course, we need a vibrant economy. I specified how in Chapter 6, and I hope that you'll read it. The current governor has proven that, again, he's taxing more and giving money away to profitable out-of-state companies. I disagree with that. I vote no when those things come before our board. It doesn't grow the economy. The government can't. It's businesses that grow the economy. The current governor is picking winners and losers as if it really depends upon him, and it doesn't. I can't imagine that to do this and actually think that we'll have a diversified economy at any point.
Thank you. Mr. Gosar.
Thank you. I believe that diversification, it's been about since I was a young boy in Pinedale. And so if it were easy, it would already have been done. But we need to take a different approach to it. We need to find out that, we will find out that if we do the good things of government, if we put the infrastructure in place, that we have a good education system, that we have the rule of law, that we have great faith. I have unbelievable faith in the ability of people to diversify their economy and to grow and create businesses. And then we sit down as a government and we try to help those businesses grow and flourish with infrastructure spending and transportation networks or communication networks. But I think in the end, you need a clear set of rules that everybody follows. You want not to pick winners and losers. You want the market to pick those winners and losers. And certainly, we need to diversify our energy portfolio. Any financial manager worth his salt will tell you the most impressive and most able to withstand the shocks of a system is a diversified portfolio. And we need to do that. We have resources we have yet to tap. And I think about the lithium field outside of Rock Springs and Tesla and Elon Musk looking for a lithium battery factory. We don't even talk about it. But Nevada, Texas, California, Arizona are talking about it, and I hope it's still available when I'm elected governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Mead.
Well, it is, if you go back and look, nearly every governor and every legislator talks about diversifying the economy, and we've worked on that. And that's why Wyoming has a higher rate of increase in manufacturing than the national average. It's why in 2013 we were 7th best in increase in international trade. It's why companies in manufacturing, from high-vis to other companies come like a Magpool are interested in Wyoming. It's why Microsoft is interested in investing $500 million in our state. We are diversifying our economy. In doing that, not only do we avoid the peaks and valleys of the mineral industry, but we also have a better opportunity to keep our young people in the state. We give them more options on what they want to do. In fact, we have diversified our economy. There's much more to do. There's no question about it. But in terms of do we want to provide incentives, my answer is yes. Not only do I think that is so, that is what I have done. And priority 1 is make sure the businesses are here that are doing well. Priority 2 is how can we attract new businesses to Wyoming. And I think the board, not me, the board has certainly done that. And if you go back and look at the votes, some of those are 5-0 votes in providing incentives to companies in state and out of state.
Thank you, Governor. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. Certainly, diversification is very important in every business and in every walk of life. In order to diversify your economy, first you need to play to your strength. Our strength are natural resources. We've allowed that to be choked to death by the EPA. I will remove that hurdle. And we'll have a robust natural resource industry to start with, from agriculture to mining. We'll have rebirth of our timber industry. We will deal with the pine beetle problem by turning that pine beetle kill into ornamental paneling, etc. Then we will also continue the robust IT backbone that the state has started. That's very important, and I've run into several small companies run by mom and pop, but they are doing business statewide, worldwide, and nationwide. So by increasing IT backbone, by increasing our natural resource base, we will diversify our economy. I totally disagree with paying anybody to move to Wyoming. We will use a better tax structure than we even have now, and a better regulatory climate than we have now to allow companies to come here, but I wouldn't pay them a dime.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Superintendent Hill.
We wouldn't want to have those businesses coming to Wyoming and paying them and picking winners and losers, because why? Everyone would want to have millions of dollars, and why would we choose one over another? What needs to happen are those regulatory burdens, those bureaucratic burdens need to be reduced. And they need to be reduced by the people who actually are impacted by them, the ones who actually live by them every day. And that's what I'll do as your governor. We'll actually go line by line and ensure that those burdens are reduced, that they're not going to continue to stifle and suffocate our economy as they continue and will continue under the current leadership.
Now, does anyone wish to comment? No. All right, I will move to the next question, which is, and we will start with you, Governor. I'm sorry, we'll start with Mr. Gosar. The legislature can have quite a bit of influence over the other two branches of government through writing laws and setting budgets. Where should the legislature draw the line to avoid infringing on the other two branches? Should the governor help the legislature find that line, especially concerning the executive branch? Mr. Gosar.
Well, thank you, and it's an apropos question. I want to make everybody perfectly aware that I'm clear that the Wyoming legislature is the source of all legislation in Wyoming. These 90 individuals are elected by their constituents, and that is one of the magics of our system of government, the separation of power. There is a balance between the legislature that sets the broad course and the executive that has the daily management. And I think that tension is awful healthy, and it's critical to balance that tension. It's inherent in our system that tension exists, and that every elected official handle that tension to find that it's creative and supportive of government. I think that when you talk about overreach, that this question begs to talk about Senate File 104 and the Superintendent of Public Instruction. For many folks, they'll find that when I come out and do not support what happened with SF 104, they're kind of surprised that a Democrat would take that position. But I think process and not people is really what gets you in trouble. If somebody is doing something illegal, there's an impeachment process. And if you need to change the office, you do it with constitutional amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gosar. Governor.
Thank you, Kathy. The question is, should the legislature draw the line to avoid infringing on the other two branches, and should the governor help the legislature find that line? I agree with Pete. There's always going to be a natural tension, and I can tell you, if you talk to people in the legislature who were back in the day when they were doing Campbell 1 and Campbell 2 in terms of school financing, I think that the legislature felt that the judicial branch had more power than the legislative branch. And so, depending upon the time, depending upon the question, sometimes the executive branch is viewed stronger, sometimes the legislative branch, sometimes the judicial branch, but you absolutely have to have that balance. You know, in last year, in 2013, when the Supreme Court overturned term limits, which I actually had the Attorney General defending, you know, that's an example. The legislature looked at it. A prior governor signed it. It was overturned as unconstitutional, as was 104. To me, that is an example of the system working properly. When something's wrong, one branch has the ability to fix it. And in those two examples I gave, the Supreme Court said it's wrong, it's unconstitutional, and it fixed it. So I think that if you look historically and now, there is tension, and there's tension because they are supposed to be separate but equal branches. And I think in Wyoming, that is exactly what we have.
Thank you, Governor. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. Separate but equal branches is, of course, how we were set up. And you don't have to wait and run to the Supreme Court. If you take the oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, you should know the Constitution. And as your governor, I know the Constitution. Now, Article 2, Section 1, Wyoming Constitution. Any member of one branch of the government is prohibited from interfering with a member of another branch of government, except as expressly outlined in this Constitution. So you don't have to guess about it. You don't have to wind up and quote about it. You ought to know the Constitution if you're the governor.
Thank you, Doctor. Superintendent Hill.
Thank you, Kathy. I helped the legislature and the current governor in finding this line at my own expense. And thank you for those who contributed. The Powers versus Meade case provides a platform for what? Protecting the executive branch, and also for preserving the separation of powers. The answer is key, and it's easy. The legislature should not be in the business of micromanaging. This last session, some of the legislators actually wanted the deans of the University of Wyoming to report to the legislature. It was crazy. It didn't make sense. And thank heavens it didn't happen. We must have a strong executive, a leader who will stand up to the legislature, and that has not been what we've had. Where the governor is weak, it creates a vacuum. And the legislature will rush and they'll fill that void. They will. They'll fill the void. And that's exactly what's been happening. So we have to have a governor who will stand up and make certain that they can work with the legislature, but from a power position, a position that says that I will stand up and I will not allow you to overrun the executive branch, which was and has and continues to be done. The other aspect here is we've had some rogue legislators, and they've thumbed their nose at the separation of powers, and the Supreme Court actually ruled on that abuse of power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would any of the candidates like to comment on anyone's answers?
I would. Thank you.
You just answered, but all right.
I would. I would like to comment on two of the comments that were made tonight.
Yes, you could comment on the other three answers, yes.
Mr. Gosar, I sat next to you on the State Board of Education, and for all of those months, 15 of them, it was very clear to me that you were in support of SF 104. I am surprised to hear you say otherwise. Governor Meade, as I stood in the room as you signed Senate File 104, I heard you say, I don't know if it's constitutional or not. We'll let the courts decide. How responsible is that?
Mr. Gosar.
Superintendent Hill, I see we have another disagreement, and that's not new. But I think that many people in this room who exist in my party and outside my party will beg to differ with that characterization. I believe, as I've always believed, that this was needed to be handled with a constitutional amendment, and I think my record speaks for itself. Thank you.
Governor Meade.
Yeah, we had two attorney generals. We had almost two-thirds of the legislators. We had two out of the three Supreme Court justices that had a different point of view. But we accept the fact that the Wyoming Supreme Court has ruled. That statement wasn't made, but in any case, as I said, I think the system has got to work this way. And since 1980, around 1980, we've had I think it's 20-plus cases where a governor has signed something and it's been overturned by the Wyoming Supreme Court. That is the system that works, and it is working in Wyoming.
Thank you, Governor. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. I would say to the legislature, when you have a top elected official out of line, impeach at that point. Don't go through all of this kabuki theater and wind up in the Supreme Court. Use the process. Thank you.
And may I respond to that?
I'm sorry, one comment. You used a comment up.
All right.
Because we've got a stack of questions we could keep here for several hours. Now, we're moving to question number 6, and Governor, we'll begin with you. And this is very appropriate question. Governor has authority to veto legislation and budget line items. Of course, the governor vetoes unconstitutional legislation. Beyond that, how should the governor exercise his/her veto? Do you favor giving the governor line item veto in non-budget bills?
Well, the answer to the question is no, I don't favor that, because having vetoed budget bills, the fact is, you can change one word, and in changing one word, you can change the whole meaning. And so it's appropriate on the budget. But if you go to non-budget items and you change, for example, they say the governor shall not appoint so-and-so as a director of an organization, and I remove the word not, it completely changes it from shall not to shall. And I think that would, in terms of the balance of power, I think that would shift it too far to the executive branch. And in terms of the legislature, I think, for now 3.5 years working with the legislature, there are certainly people that I strongly disagree with. But I am proud of the Wyoming legislature. I'm proud of the work that they do. I agree and disagree with them, but these people leave their home, they volunteer, and have different points of view. And I think it is healthy for it to be the way it is in terms of me having the ability to line item the budget, but I wouldn't support the ability to line item non-budgetary bills.
Thank you, Governor. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. Obviously, you veto unconstitutional legislation, or at least that's what we would want you to do. That hasn't always happened. Vetoing or line iteming non-budget bills, I would never do that. If it's bad, you veto the whole thing. What you want to encourage is one idea in each bill. Therefore, you have transparency and you have the ability of the people to understand the bill. When the bill refers to several different items and refers to other laws, people can't understand that. So I would encourage the legislature to come down the road with single ideas in each bill. So I would not like line item in one bill in a given non-budget bill either.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Superintendent Hill.
And this question starts with the assumption that the governor vetoes unconstitutional bills, and we know that's not true. Again, and the governor had petitioned even the Supreme Court to rehear his case. I don't trust the current governor will do the right thing. When he signed SF 104 and he said, I don't know if it's unconstitutional, and he signed it, it was a wrong thing to be doing. The veto should be exercised to protect the people's rights, not allow government to take more and more of the people's rights. Legislators are coming to the realization that budget footnotes are being abused, and thank you to the legislature and the legislators who are coming to that realization. Many budget footnotes have been abused, lists of them. You can see that on my website if you go to the actually tap on FOOT. If you think about the line item veto, the governor must be held to constitutional limitations. So I don't favor the governor having the line item veto on non-budgetary bills. It's unconstitutional.
Thank you. Mr. Gosar.
Well, my answer is no, along the same lines as the rest of the panelists. However, I think that there are other reasons for the governor to veto legislation besides constitutionality. Sometimes legislation is a bad idea, and then the legislature can come and override your veto, and that's a check and a balance and a separation of power. The budget appropriation line item veto is important, and I wish it would have been extended to the education of kids in science in Wyoming this year. That piece of legislation was not debated on the floor of either house. It impacts every single person in this room because it does matter whether a kid in Gillette learns science. And it does impact what a teacher can teach in Guernsey, even if you live in Laramie like I do or grew up in Pinedale. And so I think that that's an appropriate function. But to use the line item veto to whole pieces of legislation sets up a parallel legislature. And that's not something I think that I would be in favor of, nor do I think is a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone wish to comment on any of the answers? All right, we'll move to the last, I think this is the last, yes, the last league question, and we will begin with Dr. Haynes. Wyoming, like all states, must work with federal agencies that regulate and create obligations for the state, as well as support state projects, such as highways. How do you describe the relationship between the governor's office and the federal government?
The relationship between the governor's office and the federal government should be governed by the Constitution for the United States. So all contracts and agreements have to flow from and agree with that document or they are unlawful. And so you need people in your office And you need people in the various agencies that are affected by the federal government who understand that and understand the Constitution. And you do this as a senior executive in the boardroom. And some things you can't delegate. So you have to create that culture in state government, especially among your agency heads.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Superintendent Hill.
There is a division of authority between the feds and the state, and I talk about it in Chapter 2, Principle 5. We must protect the people from unconstitutional encroachments from the federal government. It's been happening for the last 3 years. But it's not the federal government that's just encroaching. It's a state inviting the federal government in. When I returned to the Department of Education after being absent for 15 months, the governor had 3 new programs in the Department of Education. I didn't know about them. Did you know about them? They had been requested. They had been invited in. The U.S. Department of Education was not mandated them. President Obama didn't mandate them. Secretary Duncan didn't mandate them. The Department of Education, under the leadership of our current governor, requested them. If you go to my website, you can also see not only those, but you'll see other examples of the governor inviting in the federal government in the refugee resettlement. You won't have to sue for it. I already did. And you'll see the documents where he's committed our state to what? The refugee resettlement. And it was done without your knowing. It was done without legislative oversight. It's important that we know what's going on in our government, and we haven't been. It's high time that we do.
Thank you. Mr. Gosar.
Well, I think there's an inherent tension between the federal government, state government, and local governments. And I think that's healthy. And I think it's also healthy to remember that those entities are us, and we have redress every November to have a change of course. And so I think you need to have some accountability. There are many who tout the number of lawsuits. What did they cost and what did they achieve? I think that that is an important conversation to have. You have to always start, in my life, in an examination of Wyoming history, at the negotiation table. And you do the hard work. And sometimes it doesn't end in anything but a lawsuit. But you start there first. And I think that oftentimes allows you to have standing to when you do go to the lawsuit, that you say, we tried. We took an honest effort. We made gains and we made sacrifices. And we came to a conclusion that we think is fair. And then I think that that helps you with your case. To reflexively sue, just to sue, is not something I think is healthy for us. And I think as taxpayers, I would like to see accountability for that type of approach.
Thank you. Governor Mead.
Well, I would say the relationship is often tense. We do have 27 federal lawsuits, 13 of them against the EPA. And it's not just because we want to sue, it's because you have to stand the ground for what's best for Wyoming and Wyoming citizens. And we have done that. And in saying that, though, we certainly look for opportunities. When I was first elected, I went back to Washington and met with Secretary Salazar, Secretary of Interior, and talked about we need more coal leases. Ultimately, several months later, he came out to Cheyenne, and at South High School, he announced new coal leases. Those coal leases over the life will provide Wyoming, it's anticipated, in excess of $13 billion. With regard to wolves, same sort of thing. We worked through that, and now we have a wolf hunt. Same thing with Yellowstone in terms of snow machine use. We worked through that. But when the federal government goes down a path, as they are with regional haze or their attack on coal, you have to be strong. You have to be strong not only for our state and the citizens, but in fact, and for the country. We have to have that wonderful resource and have the ability to use it. And so those lawsuits aren't just to sue. Those lawsuits are for the benefit of the citizens, our school kids, and in fact, the country.
Thank you, Governor. Would anyone?
Yes, I would.
Lieutenant Hill.
Lawsuits. You know about SF 104. Some of you followed it, and so it was very much a live lawsuit to you. I also sued the governor. When in July I asked for public records, and I had no response. In November, I finally had to sue. Right now, there's no activity on that lawsuit because I'm in a campaign, and I can't afford to do any more in it. If you don't know what's going on in a lawsuit, my guess is there's nothing going on in a lawsuit.
Any Governor?
No follow-up. I obviously disagree with her analysis.
I just saw an arched eyebrow, and I thought you might have a comment.
If you saw if you saw my eyebrow, it was a real reaction.
I see. Thank you. Well, now we're going to turn to the questions from the audience, and I will start with you, Governor. No, I guess I'd start with you, Superintendent, because we ended with Mr. Gosar. This is the question from the audience. Would you favor a redesign of the administration of the Department of Education? Now, this isn't identified as state or federal, but I'm assuming it's state.
Absolutely not. At a personal cost and a financial cost to myself and my family and several within this state, actually all over this state, the Supreme Court ruled on that, and why we're still discussing it slays me.
Mr. Gosar.
You know, I think that there's a lot that has to be decided. And I think the Ferrari report of the late 80s and early 90s said, you know, if we need to streamline, if we need to make government efficient, then maybe we need to do something with the superintendent of public instruction. I think that's tough. We're a board and commission ruled government. There needs to be 5 votes. You will go to 4 votes. You have a lot of 2 and 2 votes on the SLIB board, State Lands Board. And so you need to have a discussion about that. But then I think you also, it's very reflective, and the lesson that I take from 2010, is it's important to evaluate the quality and the character and integrity of those people putting their name up for office. I think if you reflexively take the R or the D, however you do it, and don't weigh that person's ability to level with you, to be honest with you, to look you in the eye and say, you know what, this might be hard, but we can get it done, then I think that you run into situations that aren't optimal for anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor.
Well, I agree with Mr. Gosar's comment. I mean, you have to do an evaluation on who you elect for that position. If you're going to have an elected position and you want to keep that and you don't want a constitutional change to that, the other part of it is you have to make sure that you have high quality, experts in the field, because if you lose continuity and the first thing you do is you go in there and you fire all the experts, you know, you can't have a 4-year delay. You can't have a 4-year delay, and you can't have, as we've had the last 4 years, where graduation rates have continued to drop. That is not healthy. You cannot tell a parent, hey, in 4 years or 8 years or whatever it is, we're going to start fixing these things. You have to have a level of expertise in there. And so, you know, the Ferrari report looked at that. Others have looked at it for some period of time. Do you have to have a level of expertise there that requires something other than elected official? You have good ones and you have some that are not good. So if you want to have a continual elected, you at least have to have the workings of the department, have that expertise day in and day out, and election year in, election year out.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
Would you repeat that, because the answer sometimes blurs the question?
I surely will. Would you favor a redesign of the administration of the, and I'm going to assume here, State Department of Education?
Excellent question. First of all, I strongly support an elected superintendent of public instruction. My personal proclivity is to have a teacher in that job. Now, what I would like to see change, I'd like to see the state board be elected if we're going to keep it. I would much prefer to dispense with that and go to local school boards and local school districts with the power again. But again, I strongly support an elected superintendent of public instruction who is accountable to the people. And if we're going to keep the state board, it should be elected by the people, maybe along the lines of Senate districts, not be accountable to the governor as an appointed board. Thank you.
Follow up.
Superintendent?
And I fought and I defended your right to vote. And I hope that you remember this, that Governor Meade and Pete Gosar just agreed on this. It's accumulation in the hands of the few. If you look on page 9, in Principle 4 in my red book, it's important that you take a close look at this. It's taking your rights again. They mentioned the Ferrari report. It happened in 1991. It had a report just like ours did, just like the superintendent's, and then they took your auditor and they made her a ceremonial position. And so I dealt with auditors that were appointed by the current governor every time I went through an audit. Accumulation in the power in the hands of the few.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment?
Well, I don't think our auditor is a ceremonial position. I think she does a very good job and an important job.
She does an audit.
One comment, Superintendent.
And Ms. Carpenter, I'd also like to comment.
Okay, Mr. Gosar.
I think maybe Superintendent Hill didn't get the gist of my comments. I think that if you're going to change that office, you do it with constitutional amendment. I don't advocate for that. I advocate for it to be brought to the people to change that office.
Thank you. Now, here's another question. We're getting off education on this one. And we will start with Mr. Gosar. What is the role of the state in regulating hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking? And that's from your home country up there.
Well, it is, and thank you very much for the question. I think it's important as a son of Pinedale and also the son of an oil field worker. Is a thorough, and I think too often times that the balances of power are weighed towards those that have the money or the influence. And so certainly we can find middle ground. And what is that middle ground? To be based upon science, to be based upon those things that can be found and can be tested and can be experimented upon. So do I think that those chemicals that are used in hydraulic fracturing should be made publicly available? You bet. Do they have to be made available right now? I'm not sure of that, but they should be made available to members of the government so that if there is some sort of fouling, if there is some sort of drilling that goes awry, that those property owners, those water owners, have redress, and they know what they're looking for. Thank you.
Governor Mead.
Well, the state does have an important role, and prior to my administration, the Oil and Gas Commission, Governor Friedenthal, we were the first state to require disclosure of fracking fluids. And I think not only should we be proud of that fact, but when we see the federal government trying to get involved in the hydraulic fracturing business, it is great for me to say, listen, you're way ahead of, you're way behind. The state's leading the way, and as we say, with states' rights comes state responsibility, and I think the state proudly did that. Carrying on that tradition, we've worked on baseline water testing because part of hydraulic fracturing is what's happening to water. So we're going to have baseline water testing before oil field play begins. We're going to know what the water is, and then if a question comes up, we'll be able to tell what the cause of that problem. On top of that, we're now working on setbacks. The Oil and Gas Commission and I are working on setbacks, what the appropriate setback should be from a drilling rig to, say, a house. That's the type of leadership that the state and other states have provided, and it also is a great example for us to say to the federal government, don't get your business, don't try to get into our business. We're way ahead of you, and we can do a better job than you.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. The role of government is always public health and safety and to protect everybody's right, to protect the producer's right to produce and the public's right to be safe. Proactive test wells are very important when the finger pointing starts. I really think that the proprietary nature of hydraulic fracturing fluid has to be protected, just as all other patentable items are protected. But certainly someone in the state with monitoring and enforcement authority can have that knowledge as secure knowledge. And so I think the state's role is to protect all interests, public health and safety first, the right to work by the producers, and the right to be safe by the public.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Superintendent Hill.
Fracking's been effectively used, and we've experienced some problems. So I would say that we should have the state monitoring this. We don't need the feds involved, but we need the state monitoring, and again, public safety being at the first and foremost of all of our interests.
Thank you. Anyone wish to comment further? If not, changing gears again. And here's a question, Governor, we'll begin with you. Every election, we hear about how Wyoming should take over federal lands, which are about half of our state. What do you think about this notion?
Well, it's a question on everybody's mind, and the frustration comes from the federal government and the overreach. That leads to that question. I disagree, respectfully with Dr. Haynes' view that you're going to tell the feds to stop doing business in the state, and if they don't, you're going to arrest all the federal employees. I don't think that's going to work. But on top of that, I think that the appropriate role for the state is for us to continue to look at opportunities, whether it's Seaskiddy, as we have, or other portions, to see portion by portion. I don't see the state taking over all the state grounds. I don't see us drilling in Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Park. I think we have a responsibility now to make sure we're managing our state lands well, and then look for opportunities for greater management and control, as we have, for example, on Green Mountain. For time, and as we know, Green Mountain, we told the BLM, you're not headed in the right direction. You're shutting down grazing. And so we intervened, and as a result of that, the state is going to manage that with BLM. Those are the opportunities that I think are realistic. They're not rhetoric, they're realistic, and I think we can make progress on that and having greater say in federal lands that are in Wyoming.
Thank you, Governor. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you, Kathy. First of all, Matt, the statement about arresting all the federal employees, that's your ridiculous statement, not mine. My statement is I arrest all lawbreakers. Now, there's no such thing as federal lands under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, United States Constitution. I didn't write that, but I can read, and the Constitution's written at the 8th grade level. So we ought to all be able to understand that. Now, they came in as federal land managers. With mission creep, language creep, they start calling it federal lands. With loss of civics, American history in our schools, our people don't know any better. But I do. And the Constitution's still in effect. And I'm the guy to start managing those lands for Wyoming and its people. It's just that simple. And I don't have to run the court to do it. It's been fought out in court ever since 1845, and we win. So, they're not federal lands. They're state lands managed by federal people. Some of those people, should they have Wyoming hearts, will be allowed to come to work for us. We're not going to put them in jail. We're going to put them to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Superintendent Hill.
Utah and neighboring states have been actively involved in ensuring that they are our state lands. Unfortunately, Wyoming hasn't been actively involved in it. In fact, we should be leading it. I'm wondering why we haven't had all the attorney generals in our state actually taking an active role in ensuring that those lands should be managed by us. And yet, why not? Why haven't we? So as your governor, I'll make certain that we take the lead. They are our lands, and no one would manage them better than Wyoming.
Thank you. Mr. Gosar.
Well, I think this question begs a little bit of realism and pragmatism. And so do I favor the state taking over federal lands? No. I don't think it's realistic, and I don't think it's pragmatic. And I think it takes away time, effort from problems that really exist in Wyoming. And so sure, can we talk about swaps? As a hunter and fisherman, I know about the checkerboard nature of state lands and how the corner hopping restriction doesn't allow many people in the state to access their lands. And so I would look at that always, because that's important. Our hunting and fishing heritage is important. But to say that we can take federal lands, I don't know that there's a method, nor do I think that there's an opportunity to do that. And I think it takes away from the necessary discussions that we need to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Hill.
For those who are curious about finding out more about this, if you'll go to the American Lands Council, and you'll see a great deal of work that's being done in this area. It's not fictitious, it's very real, and Wyoming should be right in there leading.
Any more comments? These are getting better and better. This is, I don't know if we should let these people go, Marguerite. These are, all right, next question, and we're going to start with you, Dr. Haynes. Should there be a special prosecutor to investigate allegations against state officials?
Question, should there be a special prosecutor to investigate allegations? It depends. It depends on who's making the allegation, and it depends on the branch of government. If the branch which ordinarily would investigate that, which is the judicial or the Attorney General's office, yes, you need a special prosecutor because the investigator needs to not have a conflict of interest. So in situations where there would be a conflict of interest, you need a special prosecutor. Begs the question, who chooses the prosecutor? So we need a process for choosing the prosecutor which will not allow the person or the department being investigated to choose that prosecutor. So I would be in favor of it, but that's more complicated than I can answer in 2 minutes. However, I would be in favor of that, but we need a process under the Constitution by which we can set that up.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Superintendent Hill.
Absolutely. I sat before the investigative committee and I looked right at Representative Kermit Brown and I said, give me a prosecutor. I'm good with the facts. We need to get away from wasting the people's time and money on these political gamesmanship, the schemes that, for instance, I just went through. It needs to end. If we have serious business to do, we need to go ahead and as the two legislators did last Friday, ask for a special prosecutor. They were denied, unfortunately, by what? An appointed attorney general, appointed by the governor. I guess we denied that appointment or that prosecutor because the governor can deny prosecution by, I guess, default. Again, accumulation of power in the hands of the few. I think we need an elected attorney general, to be quite frank. So yes, absolutely, we need to have special prosecutors and get to the facts and stop wasting the people's money.
Thank you. Mr. Gosar.
I guess I find myself in the strange position of being the smaller government person here. And I wonder if this is a solution looking for a problem. I would like to know what those historical precedent is, and if we need one, well, let's do that. But, just off the top of my head, as a social studies teacher, I'm not sure that I can come up with more than zero times to need it. And so if it's needed, well, certainly, but I always defer to smaller government.
Thank you. Governor Mead.
Well, of course, we already have a process in Wyoming where the Attorney General, with limited exceptions, cannot be a prosecutor. And there are some exceptions to that. But what he does have the ability to do, as he did when Mr. Winnie made allegations against the superintendent, is we don't prosecute. We refer that to the district attorney's office. And it does happen. Sometimes you'll have a district attorney or a county attorney who has a conflict themselves, and he or she will then ask another prosecutor in the state to look at it. So we have great prosecutors in the state. They have the ability, and in fact, they have had cases of high profile where they have the ability to do that. So I think that is the system we have, where prosecutors around the state who are elected have the ability to prosecute and do those cases. I think it's a good system.
Thank you. Comments, Superintendent Hill?
This comment is directly to the governor. If you'd asked for a special prosecutor, in my case, you would have saved the people $1.3 million. Actually, it's over 2.5 when you start counting all the expenses. Over 2.5 million, and you would have stopped the attack on a political opponent.
Comments further?
Well, a couple things. One is, I'm not sure where she gets her figures. We were told by the legislature we had $250,000 to investigate. We returned most of that money, and that doesn't solve the problem of the federal investigation that's going on, and so it's more complex than suggested.
Thank you. Anyone other than those who've commented? So that'd be Dr. Haynes.
Darn.
Sorry, we've got to keep this manageable. All right, Mr. Gosar, any comment? Dr. Haynes. All right, now here's a nice, mellow question. Okay? Are we ready for that? We're going to start with you. Well, here we go. Superintendent Hill, we're going to start with you. What is the biggest myth you would like to correct about yourself?
That there's a federal investigation going on. That is a myth. The governor said he looks under the hood to see what's going on. We've talked to all of them. I want to know who he's talking to. I know that he went out and he talked to President, well, actually, one of the underlings of the president right after I was removed from office. And what he did is he actually went out and signed us, or attempted to the No Child Left Behind waiver, actually taking us down a path of more federal requirements in education. And now he said that somehow I'm under federal investigation. What a hoot. I look to him and say, please show me the documents. Let's do it. Anyone who wants to go to my website, CindyHillForGovernor.com, will show you all the documents that I've been able to attain. Oh, and by the way, again, at a personal cost to self, because I didn't use the Attorney General or the 70 attorneys in the Attorney General's office to, again, attack a political opponent. I actually stood up for your rights and for your ability to vote with my own personal resources. So, no, if there was anything they had on Cindy Hill, holy smokes, I would be an orange and I wouldn't be sitting here right now. Elected officials all over the country, just with one small thing, can be prosecuted. And Lord knows I've endured. And I look forward to the next debate, and I look forward to more rebuttals.
More than one comment per question, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Gosar.
Well, I'd like to address the myth that I can't win in November. As a 7th of 10 kids, the 5th of 7 brothers, when you're an underdog, you just start feeling a little bit comfortable. And so, I think that as I look out to people and I talk to people in Wyoming, I don't know that I much ever ask the question, are you a Democrat, Independent, Republican? Shake their hands, look them in the eye, and tell them, this is what I think, this is who I am. And as a walk-on in Wyoming, at the University of Wyoming, you get a chance to figure out how you get one of these things done. You take it a day at a time, and you get better, and your campaign gets better, and you meet more folks. And you say to them, are you tired of not having an input in your government? Maybe it's time to have somebody who works for a living represent you. Maybe it's time somebody who's had to balance the checkbook in his life will work for you. And maybe it's time that somebody who presses for solutions and takes principled stands is somebody that you can put your trust in. Because we might not agree on everything, but you can agree that I'll be working for you. And I think the tenacity of my background speaks to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gosar. Governor Mead.
Well, it's interesting because, when you're in this office, you get a lot of emails, you get a lot of telephone calls, and you find out across the state that, one interesting one we heard one time is that they were talking about my wife and that she was a Rockefeller, which then I went home and said, you should have revealed that to me. The fact is, I don't know about myths, but what I would want people to know about me is that my wife and I have certainly felt privileged to have this job, and we've worked hard at it. And we love Wyoming, and we love Wyoming people. And I've always said, my belief is you don't do this job as a career. You get in, you make the hard decisions, and you get out. And we've made hard decisions, and we made decisions that are popular, and we've certainly made some that are unpopular. But I think that is the role of governor, to make those hard decisions. And so if there's a myth out there, and I'm sure there are many, but what I would like to do is just, from my standpoint, we've worked very hard and trying to not just represent certain people, but all the people of Wyoming.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you. The myth that I would like to dispel is that I'm impractical, that the Constitution won't work, that these lands don't belong to Wyoming, that I would drill in Yellowstone. If I drill in Yellowstone, we get a volcano. And I'm not looking for one. So that's a ridiculous thing, but I use that to make a point. The thing I'd like you to know about me is that I am, by the grace of God, a self-made man, successfully owning 4 companies, started on my own nickel, taking that risk, that I've signed the front and back of paychecks, that I've sat at night trying to be sure my employees get paid before my wife and I get paid. So I understand what it is to live from paycheck to paycheck, and I understand what it is to deal with an overly regulatory government where you've got bureaucrats sticking their nose in everything with no idea of how the world works. So I really like you to understand that I am from the fabric of America. By the grace of God, I've made it to where I am, and with your help, I'll turn this state around. Thank you.
Anyone wish to comment? Superintendent Hill.
People ask me, why are you running for governor? And I say, if you knew what I knew, you'd run too. There's so much going on right now in our state that you will never see. There are people who are misguided. They're going down a path that government knows best, not that you do, and that they're not here to serve you. And I believe it is upside down. And I've seen it up close and personal. And I say to you, I hope you'll remember this. You would run too if you knew what I knew.
Any other comments? Well, as it turned out, on that mellow question, that's the last that we can have because we're running out of time. I'm going to take a moment here for editorial privilege. Number one, I not only think we should thank these individuals for running, but for giving us a good, solid debate. There was no waffling. Let's give them a good hand. It's a good debate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, with that encouragement from the audience, we're going to have our 2-minute closing. Mr. Gosar.
Well, I'm going to return to that small bass lady and say thank you once again. It's such a privilege to be a small town kid looking out at this group and being able to talk to you. Because I really do think that that's important. I think talking and communicating and taking honest approaches and not poll testing your positions. not trying to figure out what you want me to say in Gillette or Laramie or Jackson, and adjusting that to the crowd that I'm in. I hope to hold to that. And I hope you'll hold me to that also. Because how can you make a determination on the quality or the strength of my candidacy if I continue to change my position? And so I won't. And so I thank you very much tonight. And I hope you'll attend any of my event. You're always welcome, Republican, Independent, Democrat alike. And it's like an opportunity to come on Wednesday nights from 7 to 9 and ask the hard questions. Because if you're running for governor, that's what it's about. You answer the hard questions. And you take them one right after the other. And then you hold out the idea that you're not always right. But you'll find and you'll work at it. And you'll continue to work in the best interests of Wyoming's people. It's important. I thank you for this opportunity, and I thank the people who sat on this dais with me tonight. I know how tough it is, and I know how hectic the schedule is, but I do appreciate your opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gosar. Governor Mead.
Well, Kathy, thank you. You've done a wonderful job. I want to thank the audience and all those listening in. It is healthy to have these debates. It's important to be here and to answer the questions and let the voters decide. You know, this election is obviously an important election. Every election is an important election. But as we see the future of Wyoming and see where we want to go, you know, the fact is you got to have a vision and you got to have a positive vision. Wyoming is in good shape, and we're in better shape than we were 3.5, 4 years ago. And we want to continue that trend. And when you think about solutions and the problems that we have, and we do have problems that we need solutions for, you have to be a realist. You have to address what is real and address it in a positive way. And in my time as governor, from changing unemployment to investment in our local communities to investment in businesses, new and old, we have made a positive difference. And I want to continue to do that because when we talk about these things and we answer these questions, you know, they're very specific and they're issue-oriented. But the fact is, Carol and I with our kids, you with your kids and grandkids, your friends and your neighbors, what we really want is to make sure Wyoming stays this wonderful place. And this is why this job is so important, is you want somebody that is not going to be divisive, not going to throw down the gauntlet at everything, but find solutions. Find solutions that are positive for every citizen in the state. And some days you feel that and you feel great about it. And we recognize that there is other problems out there. But we'll continue on doing our best to make sure years from now we can look back and say whether it's with water strategy, energy strategy, what we've done for Forest Health. We've left a legacy that improves Wyoming a little bit so our kids and grandkids continue to have this wonderful Wyoming experience.
Thank you, Governor Mead. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you, Kathy. And thanks again to the League of Women Voters and to all of you who are here and those who are listening on the radio. As a farm boy from Louisiana, born with a cowboy's heart, I got here as fast as I could, and I've never looked back. This is a watershed moment in Wyoming. We can either keep doing what we've always done, and then we'll get what we've always got. That's old cowboy taught me that. I'm sure you've all heard it, but it's a fact of life. Or we can change directions and open the owner-operator's manual for this state and this country, which is the Constitution for the United States and the Constitution of Wyoming. If we go back to the Constitution, this state will flourish. The state will prosper. The people will be free. You will have liberty. You will have high-paying jobs. Now, the state's not in good shape. One of my offices is in Woodland, Wyoming, and half the storefronts are empty. There are empty storefronts downtown Cheyenne. We lost many, many jobs. Coal mining is shut down in Carbon County because the federal government, using the EPA as the spearhead, is shutting down coal-fired power nationwide. That's an opportunity for Wyoming. We can move from 20% of the nation's electric power to 50 or 60% of the nation's electric power. I know how to do that. I have built companies, and I have the broad experience from power generation and distribution to mining with Kennecott and in agriculture and medicine and healthcare. I've been blessed by the Lord with the education and experience to lead Wyoming at this point in her history. So on August 19th, I ask you for your prayers first and your vote second, and the sun will come up in Wyoming and then on the nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Superintendent Hill.
In the last election, the Common Core, SF 104, the gas tax, none of those were issues. You don't know what the issues will be in the months ahead. I believe if the people of Wyoming had known that the governor would sign SF 104, that he'd be pressing for the adoption of the Common Core, that he would be, again, increasing the gas tax, increasing the burden of taxes every day, I don't believe we would have elected him. I wrote this so that you would know what your next governor's principles would be. You should know who her principles are, and you should know that when a law school, there was a professor over at UW who said, it's a gutsy thing to do, to put your principles in writing, and I did it. And it wasn't gutsy. She said, what if she changes her mind? I won't. I've been complimented again and again for keeping my promises, and I'll continue to do so. I want you to know this. My principles don't change. They were the same as last year and 10 years ago and years ago. You don't change your principles. That's politics. I want you to know also that when it comes to the course of correction, the only thing we can focus on is I look at two mothers in this house right now that have two profoundly disabled children. We should have the interests of the people in mind first and foremost. And I am so sorry that you have experienced the cuts that you have. And I am sorry to this state that we've been blessed with wealth and we've been blessed with so many resources. And yet we have the governor who sits before us and doesn't always the truth. And I promise you that I will. And that I will keep your interests first and foremost before any buildings and before anything. It will come first. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before you leave, as they say, a word from our sponsor.
Okay, and again, thank you to our candidates who showed up and to everyone who's in the crowded standing room only. I appreciate the interest in this race online and live broadcast. To remind everyone that yesterday's forums on the Secretary of the State and Superintendent will be rebroadcast next Wednesday, August 6th on Channel 19. That's the Charter Cable TV here in town at 6 p.m. Saturday, August 9th at 11 a.m. We will post the video on YouTube and on the League website, which is up there, the URL. And encourage everyone to get as much information as you can from websites and other sources. Please do vote. Remember, you can register at the polls if you're not registered right now. So thank you very much for your interest. Be informed and vote. Thank you. Thank Kathy Carpin. Can we thank you for Kathy Carpin?
We got a good support. That was one of the better debates.